Hello, everyone. Megan here from Romance by the Book with the lovely Marielle.
Hello.
And we are here with our author of the month for August, Sebastian.
Hi,
Hello. Thank you so much for being here.
thank you.
We read The Perfect Crimes of Marian Hayes for August, and it was a lot of fun.
It
We're
was.
excited to talk to you.
I think you might know because I put it all over my social media, but I did this summer, I read all of your like 1950s, I guess they're novellas,
Yeah,
and
snack sized. They're not full length novels. Yeah.
but they're so much fun, and I had a blast. I tried to like rope all other people into reading it with me. And then, of course, I was like not satisfied. So we went ahead and did The Perfect Crimes of Marian Hayes, which was so much fun. I think you have a really unique way of like, even when the premise could be really like angsty, like it still feels very like a hug, and there's kittens, and it's like it's still like it's kind of a soft read, which is really appreciated sometimes.
It was going to be like when I pitched those two books, Kit Webb and Marian Hayes, I had in mind a much angstier like story, and then the pandemic hit and I just wasn't capable of it, and don't think I was capable of it before that, to be totally honest. Like, it's not as if I've have a history of being able to write plot heavy, like super high drama books, right? But I thought I was going to for this like duology, and then like it was just not going to happen at all. And so I was like, okay, so how do I take a premise that is like pretty high stakes and make it so that pretty much everything is fundamentally okay for all of the characters, even when they're like doing murders and stuff. And so
I didn't know if that was like a thing that was intentional, or that you like sat down and thought about like, this is how I'm gonna do it, so it's soft and like crimes, but or if it's a thing, because this is something that happens to me sometimes, where I'll be like, I am going to write, and this is going to be the dark hero. And then he comes out like awkward and just not like, so it's not, I'm like, oh, well, okay. Or we do this.
Or we do this.
Yes. Like I definitely wanted, like, writing Marian, like I wanted her to have as many hard edges as possible, but I also kind of knew that like that meant I was going to have to offset that with the softest possible love interest, right? Like,
Yeah.
That's just like, I think that's probably like romance novel standard, right? Is that if you have like one who's like super difficult, you have the other who's really easy.
Mhm.
And it's just that it's usually, I mean, like usually you get the, like usually if it's going to be sunshine grumpy, usually the woman, if it's like a male female romance, usually the woman is the sunshine one, which is like,
Yeah.
which we all love. That's a classic for a reason, right?
Yeah.
But like in this case, it was like I knew that I was going to have to lean hard. Like if I'm leaning hard into difficult heroine territory, you have to like lean even harder into cinnamon roll hero territory. At least for me, right? Like I'm happy to read about two difficult characters falling in love with one another. It's just that I know that that's not a book that I'm going to write.
Yeah. I actually, not too long, like in the past few months, I've heard a couple of people describe like a reverse grumpy sunshine, and I was like, how do you reverse that? Like, it's still in my head, but that's just because I'm like, it's not gendered, so I don't understand. Like, when they're like grumpy sunshine but backwards, I'm like, sunshine grumpy, I don't understand. But it's interesting because it is, I think, like the go-to that people think of when it's like the man is grumpy and gruff, and like that's a whole like daddy thing too, that, and yeah, like, yeah, definitely that's a grumpy man. But the sunshine, like the female character is very seldom allowed to be like truly grumpy, and I feel like Marian really was, like, there are a lot of things that I think could be, and probably were, difficult to like, maybe for readers to if a reader wanted to like put themselves and be like, I am Marian, like it might not be a very comfortable fit.
Yeah.
If that's the way to explain it.
Yeah, no, and I think that especially with like male female romances, I wish we had a better phrase, like, because like male female doesn't exactly roll off the tongue, and I don't want to say straight because they aren't, you know what I mean, but like
right.
I think that like with male female romances, you do often have, some readers do have like, they want to be able to put themselves in the shoes of one of the characters, and it's usually going to be the women character, right? And you're not, I think that if you were going to put yourself into Marian's shoes, it's because you are like embracing your own messiness to a level that you might not want to do when you are reading a novel recreationally, you know?
Yeah. Well, I mean,
Like, I don't have time to unpack all this right now. I'm just trying to read some fiction. Yeah.
That's funny. Yeah, I thought that was an interesting like choice too, because I mean, because it does sound like you're intentional about how you do things and how you choose to like pair people and kind of do the stories that you choose to tell, and like the way that you choose to tell them seems like a thing that you do on purpose. And I was curious, like how or when did you decide that Marian was going to be like as sharp and like pointy as you could make her? Like, did that decision come before you even decided to on who the hero was?
Yeah. I knew from the beginning of Kit Webb, like every scene that I had between Percy and Marian, like he's a prickly character and she's worse. You know what I mean? Like every single scene between the two of them, like it's like she's, even when things are going okay in her life, okay, like I wanted it to be pretty clear that even like under the best possible circumstances, okay, like Marian is like that friend, you know,
like a little cactus.
yeah, like she's like she does not make her life easy. She does not make anyone's life easy. You know, like she has her own agenda. No one really knows what it is, and you know to like give her a wide berth. You know, and then when things get complicated for her, she is like even more so. Like she's immediately going to the extreme of like, you know, like now she's engaged in like light espionage and then murder. Like, you know, things escalate quickly. You know, she's not, maybe she's like not like a dramatic person in the way that you usually think of dramatic characters, you know, like she doesn't have a lot of like flourish, but like for her to pull that trigger, which I don't think is a spoiler, like she does it before the book starts, right?
Yeah.
But like for her to pull that trigger is like not even the most extreme thing she's done like that month, you know?
Yeah. Well, I think it's interesting too, because she is somebody who in the book, like she doesn't always accept comfort the way that it's offered. And it felt to me, I'm not sure if you might have put it on the page and I just thought it was my own idea. So sorry if that's the case. But it felt to me like she didn't want to accept comfort of like, oh, it was an accident, like it was the situation, because she probably like in her head is like, well, I might have done it anyway.
I would have done it anyway. Yeah. He just so happened to be pointing a gun at Percy. I was about to kill him regardless.
Yeah, like there was a draft of this book where he wasn't pointing a gun at Percy, and I was just like, you know what? I feel like I'm asking a lot of readers to, you know what I mean? Like I think I'm asking too much there, right? And so I decided to leave that like in between the lines, that she would have been totally okay doing it even if he hadn't been, but he was, and like that is relevant from like a reader perspective, and it's probably relevant from Percy's perspective, like when he learned that, but it's not really relevant to like Rob at the end of the day, and it's certainly not relevant to her.
Yeah. I guess that kind of leads into my question, speaking of murder, which is did you always know for sure that the Duke would die, or did you ever entertain the idea of him surviving? Okay.
He had to go, and he like, you know what, I think that possibly like in like before writing it, when I was pitching it, I don't remember if he was going to die in the first book. Okay. I knew that he was eventually going to die and that Marian was going to kill him, but I didn't know like whether that was going to be on page or whether it was going to be like a big drawn out dramatic thing. And at the end, I decided to make it again, like this isn't like an angsty like saga, right? Like I decided to make that as matter of fact as possible, right? Like, you know, like in Kit Web, like the holdup happens, it's over, and then everybody has to deal with like mainly emotional fallout after that, you know. And then in Marian Hayes, it's you know, it's the same thing. Like the murder happens like really before the book starts, and then everyone, and then she has to go like put the pieces back together after that.
Yeah, I thought I was concerned for Milk because I was like, well, he couldn't like with his dying breath or you know, like, which it was enough tension, I think, to keep me concerned for them, even when the wound, I think, was described as being like, well, he's probably gonna die. Pretty sure that's happening.
There had to be like enough suspense to make her leave town. Like that's it. You know what I mean? Like I only needed just to be like that little, just like enough doubt, but not enough doubt so that like not enough doubt so that you're seriously worried that she's gonna have to go to
Like
the continent.
vacate the country. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Like leave town, but not go all the way to the continent.
Yeah. just like to be on the safe side. Yeah.
Yeah. I guess there is a line in there when they get to, but it's Rob that's like, oh, well, we're close to the coast, so if anything happens, we're good.
Spirit her away.
Did you, speaking of that whole like leaving town, Marian leaves and she like Rob is very like, oh, should we go get your kid? And she's kind of like, no, it's fine. And I thought it was interesting. It made me, I mean, I think because of the time that you're writing in, you can't like really diagnose or like tell us exactly what's going on with her. But I had many theories. Poor Megan had to listen to my many theories about like what could be like the layers of things that could be messing with the way she's bonded with her baby, or like how she feels about, like she wanted to make sure her baby was safe, and it seemed like she was like fiercely protective of her child, but not in that like in the way that you would normally consider a maternal, I guess. Like, and I didn't know if that was part of like her prickliness, or if it was, as I theorized, like all these layers of things that that might have like a postpartum depression situation, or
abusive spouse situation, and how she came to be pregnant and everything. Yeah.
just being sick the entire pregnancy.
So yeah, like, that too. Geez.
Yeah. I mean, like I definitely envisioned her as having postpartum depression, and like, yeah, there aren't really the words to like historically appropriate words to explain that, right? But like, we also know that postpartum depression is more likely when you've had a difficult pregnancy, when you've had past trauma, right? Like these are all like, so
she said all the
things. Yeah.
Yeah. It would be a surprise if she didn't have some kind of, you know, like emotional consequence to what she had been through in the previous year. Right. And so, yeah, I think that like she's depressed, and I think she knows it, right? Like, I think that she knows that what's happening isn't entire, like she knows that she's not the kind of mother that she wants to be. But I think that she also knows that like it's out of her grasp, probably for reasons that are beyond her control, you know. But there's a line in there where Rob says like, I think you're a good parent, you know? And like, and that's something that like when my kids were little, I thought about that a lot, you know. That like I had postpartum depression, and I often thought to myself like, I am like really not a great mother. But somebody said to me like, but are you a good parent? And I was like, holy shit, like that's not a way I'd ever thought of it, you know. Like, and it's because obviously we have a really gendered view of like what parenthood is supposed to look like. And once I took what mothering is supposed to look like out of the equation, like for me, it was so much easier to like bond with my children and have fun with them, and like and sort of just be myself, you know. And like my hope is that, you know, like for Marian, after the events of the book, like she's able to do that too, you know.
Yeah.
is to like be like, okay, I'm a good parent. Like maybe I'm not affectionate. Okay, like in the way that like I feel like mothers are supposed to be. Maybe I'm not, maybe like I don't want to cuddle my child, but like I can be happy when I see other people do that, you know, and like and
create that environment too, because
yeah.
she made sure that that her baby was always with somebody who could provide those things, which I thought was really interesting to put in a book, and that she consciously is like, oh, well, like first she's a baby, so moving her probably is like, you know, she's fine, but also the people who are there can give her
what she needs.
these things.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean,
Or like maybe things that Marian couldn't have necessarily given her at the time.
Yeah, yeah. And I mean, like her relationship with her father is good. Like she says that he was like, I think doting and permissive. Okay. But like, that's how Marian would describe somebody who was affectionate and loving, right? Like that's, you know, he was probably a really, really good father, you know?
Yeah.
And,
she's had such a hard time with emotions though, because even when Rob is like, oh yeah, your dad, we were talking, he's so proud of you, and she's like, oh, my chest should not hurt like this, like, and I thought
like weird,
like, oh,
yeah.
like, this feels like an old school like hero thing, like, oh, it must be heartburn, very
cannot feel feelings, does not compute. Yeah,
right. No, she's just on a good day, she's not good with emotion. You know what I mean? Like even things that ought to be uncomplicated, like her dad loving her, is like, you know, like it's, yeah, like her dad is getting really old and like is not like mentally present most of the time, right? But like even beyond that, she's not able to like emote in any kind of way that most of us would recognize as emotion.
right.
Did you worry that readers might have a hard time like believing that the longevity of their relationship or like their future because of that? And I do think that like gender wise, like the expectation is always for that the woman, the female, is going to be like, even if she's grumpy, or even with like those hard heroes, that even if they're like hard to the world, that they're going to be soft for that one person.
Right.
And Marian really doesn't ever, like, that doesn't change about her. Like you see that she does things specifically to like accommodate Rob's needs, and you're like, oh, well, she must care about him, but you have to like interpret it, because she is not like, oh, how sweet, or, you know, like she never feels soft towards anybody.
Yeah. Yes. I think that like, yes, first of all, I think that like any reader who would have I think that readers who would have difficulty with the happy ending because of Marian's personality probably also had difficulties at several points along the way with the story. Okay, like where it's just not this, like this just wouldn't be the book for them, right? Like they like, and so at that point they're already off the rails, and so there's nothing I can do, and like they should read a different book next time, right? Like, you know what I mean? Like, and I always feel bad saying that, but not every book is for every reader. Like there are a lot of books that I read and I'm like, this is for someone else, you know? And sometimes I keep reading them the whole time. I'm like, yep, like this is not for you, Kat, you know? But in my mind, the happy ending works because Rob loves emotional labor. Like he loves doing it. It's his favorite thing, right? Like he wants to do the work of two people in a relationship. And I think that as long as he knows that the other person cares for him, right? And he is able to interpret her little like acts of service, you know, as her love language, probably. I think she is able to interpret that as love, right? And the fact that she trusts him at all as like pretty much like the most she could love anyone, you know, he's able to do that. And then since he believes in her feelings for him, he is willing to go the rest of the way, you know, which is pretty much like what we expect of the woman in that dynamic, right? Is that like, you know, he does something for her towards the end of the book, and like that's a signal to us and to her that he's like in it permanently, and she's able to like make sure that the rest of it works out. She can interpret it from like his grumpy language to like normal people language, you know, and that's going to be enough. And like I honestly don't know if that dynamic works out in real life. Like I have no idea, but it does in romance novels. And so it does for Rob and Marian.
Yeah. I mean, I think if you look at the whole book, like throughout, there are things that she does that for me, I was convinced she was only doing it because it was important to Rob.
Mhm.
Like even when he took that like beleaguered barn cat and it
Yeah.
was like scratching him up and she's like, give me that cat. And
Yeah.
just, brr. And later the horse spooks and she never drops the cat. And Rob is like, oh, you saved the cat for me. And she's just like, why would I drop this cat? Like that makes no sense. Here,
Right.
goodbye. And I was like, okay.
Right. Like, how dare you accuse me of like saving this cat for you?
But I was like, well, I mean, maybe maybe it's this is the kind of character where it's like those little things that you have to like put a marker, like this, here's the thing.
And that's what she does. Like that is her love language. It's like, and when she talks about or thinks about saving animals for her brother and Percy, because like she says they were both like soft-hearted idiots, right? Who wanted to go save animals, as if Marian doesn't care about wounded animals, right? She's way above that. And so that's how she learned how to, like subdue injured hedgehogs or whatever, right? But like that's how she takes care of the people around her, is by indulging their silly whims of emotion.
Mm-hmm.
I
guess same with like his not liking being in enclosed spaces or whatever. Like it's like he mentions it one time and then next thing you know, she's like, oh, I had to clean out this room anyway. Why don't you just sleep over here in this big airy spot?
It's interesting because that actually also leads to my next question, which is there's a lot of subtext in the story and things like constantly bubbling beneath the surface for both of the main characters. And so how do you decide in your writing, like what gets brought to light on page versus and actually discussed versus what stays hidden and you have to kind of read between the lines?
Yeah, that's like often in one draft, it'll be one thing. And then I'll sort of be like, okay, there's just too much happening. There's too much happening on the surface. And so I'll push something back down. So that way, just because if you talk about everything in words, it's like, and it's possibly boring, right? And it can be like an overwhelming experience. There's just like too much happening, right? Mm-hmm. And so by making some of it's subtext, but it's also optional, right? Like you can read the story and you can get the story and get the characters without thinking about it. Okay. Which is probably like a terrible way to talk about reading, but sometimes you do only want to like read the mandatory part of the plot. And the rest of it can be there for you to discover on a reread or not at all,
That's so interesting. Okay. I like that.
I do too. I mean, I think that I am kind of a moody reader in that sometimes like what I choose to read depends on how I feel, like what I feel like reading. But I think I read fairly widely, and I think I do that because sometimes I want a book that like makes me think and like it's not, I have to like fight to understand what, and other times I just want a book that's like, look, there's flowers. Now over here, we're doing this. And then like, I don't have to think at all because it's all right there. And I'm very happy to know that that's in the world. And that there are books that you can kind of do, like choose your own adventure. And like,
I mean, like, cause sometimes you, like you said, you want like a book that makes you think, right? And other times you just need something to prevent you from being alone with your thoughts, like
that's true. Sometimes you wanted to make you not think,
and like I listen to a lot of audiobooks, and like lately I've been listening to so many thrillers. And like last week I read a thriller that was like really deep, and I was like, I am not in the mood for quality.
You're like, I cannot right now.
No, like there's no thinking. Like I just want to fold this laundry while this like poor character makes terrible choices. That's all I want, and that's like that used to be how I read some romance, but now that like I write romance, it's more difficult for me to turn off the thinking part of my brain. You know what I mean? Like where I'm like, oh, I see what you did there. You know,
Yeah.
like, I don't want to see what you did there. Like if you know what I mean? Like if I'm folding laundry,
Don't
like,
want to know how the sauce is made.
No,
Just want to eat it.
exactly. I want to be in total ignorance. I want to be like a newborn baby, like you know who you're telling a story to.
I think it's interesting though that like especially with thrillers and suspense books, that like sometimes I want to feel smart. Like sometimes I want to be like, oh, I saw that coming from a mile away. I read that
He
first
was the bad
chapter and I
guy.
knew.
Yeah.
But other times I want to like have to kind of fight for, or I want to be surprised. Like I want to get to where, and I'm like, oh no, I didn't like, I was going down the complete wrong path. And it's funny how you can just be in the mood for something else. I also listen to audiobooks when I do laundry, and I don't want to be thinking too hard because I just want to like make that fitted sheet work. That's the mental energy. That's where that's going.
Or like when you're cooking, like if it's a really good book, like you're never making dinner. It's not happening, you know? And like, God forbid I actually just stand there and not have my headphones on and listening to something, you know? That's too terrible to think about.
Like listen to my children fight over toys. No, thank you.
God.
Like, we're
Oh my
headphoning. Yeah, that I've been dealing with that way because of course end of summer, so they're like starting to get on each other's nerves, and I'm like, okay, everybody needs to go back to school. We've had enough of this now.
You don't want to be lulled by the chopping.
Well,
like,
and then when they get home, they're like, then they're happy to see each other because they've been gone all day, and then they don't fight as much, which is nice.
Yeah, like last night, two of mine had a whole conversation at the dinner table, and I was like so used to them fighting with one another that I was like, stop arguing. And they both looked at me like we're talking about Spanish class. And I was like,
excuse me.
So
You're like, wait, I'm sorry, I'm having a flashback or something.
They flipped the script on you and you were not prepared. Oh, that's funny.
That is funny. Oh my gosh. So this just this funny moment makes me want to think about the question that I always ask our authors, which is, what is your favorite trope to read?
Okay, so I like, first of all, I like, you know, for legal reasons, like my disclaimer is that I like all tropes. I honestly do. Like even like my least favorite trope, I've read it and I've enjoyed it. But when I read something that's like real, like the real deal enemies to lovers, like I can get into that. Like that's something that I'm never gonna write. Like I'm never gonna write like the assassins falling in love with one another. It's never gonna happen. Same with like rival spies, Joanna Bourne. Okay, like that. Like, okay, like that is my favorite. Is when you have people who are like enemy spies falling in love with one another, like that type of thing. I love it. Can't write it. Can totally just appreciate it as a spectator.
I think it's hard to write too, because enemies to lovers. I mean, I've read some. I think a couple of them are like old school books, but sometimes it's just like bickering, like hate each other, oh, like mean, and I'm like, you can't be like, there's a line that if you cross it, I don't believe it anymore. But if you're just like, I feel like those can be tricky. But when you get them right, I love them forever.
Exactly, that's exactly it. Like I want like a good enemies to lovers is perfection. I also will so happily read a friends to lovers. Like if a book is marketed as friends to lovers, like, and it really looks like it is friends to lovers, you know what I mean? And not like some kind of like fake substitute, you know, then I am like, I will buy that book. I'll buy it in multiple formats, you know.
If it involves educational kissing, it makes me very happy. Like
a pact, like a sex pact.
Yeah.
So we're just friends, it's fine. Yeah,
that's funny. You know, I never think so many people say enemies to lovers is their favorite, and I never think to myself like, oh, that's one of my favorites. But then again, like my favorite book of the last 2 years was like hardcore enemies to lovers, like so hard. And I was like, it's weird. Like it's like the exception proves the rule. Like I would probably say my least favorite is Secret Baby, and yet one of my favorite books from one of my favorite authors is like a second chance Secret Baby, and I'm like, well, you know,
is it the Beverly Jenkins Secret Baby?
Oh no, it's not. Okay. But that makes me want to read that too.
No. Yeah,
Beverly Jenkins can make things work though.
Yeah, no, totally. It's where it's like you're all like, it's one of those things where like when an author is really, really good at like deep point of view, right? Like when you really are in the character's head, like unless the character truly is despicable, you are willing to give them a whole lot of grace. And like that's what Beverly Jenkins does, is that like you can sort of inhabit the character in a way that like a lot of people, a lot of writers try to do, but she's like she's the best.
She's so good. Yeah. The question that I usually ask is more on the writing side of things. If we were a fly on the wall while you were deep in your writing process, what would we see or witness, I guess?
So one thing that I didn't accept about my writing process until maybe a year ago is that for every 80,000 words of finished book, I'm probably deleting something awfully close to 40,000 words. Okay. And yeah. And like, that's just and that's just what makes it to the garbage folder. Okay. Like not, like in Scrivener, like there's a trash folder that isn't the trash folder on your computer. Like it just lives there forever if you want it to. And like there's other, like, and that's not even counting the words that I delete when I'm tightening up, which is also a lot of words, so it's sort of like that it feels wasteful to like some like it's not wasteful. Those words didn't take up any, like they didn't cost anything other than a couple seconds of time, and like they apparently are necessary. Okay, so I just have to like say goodbye to them. Like they're just part of the journey, and I hate it, but that's part, you know what I mean? Like, and that's, yeah. And now that I accept it, I'm like a little bit more at peace with it. So yeah.
So we would see you writing words and deleting words.
Painstakingly deleting words.
It's so like, it's better to not know how many you're deleting, but knowing that it's part of that it needs to happen, but has to happen, right? Makes me feel like less tragic about it.
I mean, it's better than that it happens than publishing a book with all these things that weren't necessary. Like, I think that's worse to me, to get a book where I'm like, man, you did not have to tell me all of this.
Often, like, it's not only stuff that's not necessary, it's also like there are entire like subplots that I take in a different direction. Okay. Like that, and that's like that winds up, a whole lot winds up in the trash can, like I don't even remember what the subplots were for this book, but there were quite a few, like, or just like conversation scenes that could have been something different and wound up being something better,
Yeah. If it's, I mean, I think I think that anything that's creative has to like do its thing. So it's hard because there are so many people who are very like focused on productivity and like moving forward, and that it doesn't work that way for everybody or for every project. So I feel like it's probably better to accept if you're gonna have to delete things that's part of it.
And it's also like it helps me, like, so I know that like when I'm writing, like when I'm really in the zone, I know that I can write like 3,000 words a day, and that's a level I can maintain for a couple of weeks before I start to feel like I never want to write again. And like it's 3,000 words a day, but it's okay that probably like 1,000 of those words isn't going to be, it helps me write the trash, right? Like it helps me get words on the page, even though I know they might not be the final words, even though I might just put two characters like they may just be eating a meal and like talking about garbage, and that helps me get the vibes in a way that like I might not be able to do if I were like, I only can write the perfect words.
Yeah, that makes sense to me. That, like, I mean, at least if 1,000 of them is going away, you're still writing 2,000 words a day that are like the words that you are happy to have put on the page and sent out to people. I'm happy that you wrote all your words.
Thank you.
I think that's it. We've got all our recaps. I guess by the time this is on air on the internet. We will have done all our recaps, and they'll be living in our highlights and in our videos. And but we need to know, what do you have coming up next?
So my next book should be a self-published 1970s book in the Cabot series. Okay. It was supposed to be a novella, and then it got completely out of hand. The opposite of 30,000 written words means 10,000 in the trash happened. Okay. Where I wound up with, like, almost effortlessly, I wound up with a book, you know,
Nice.
and a book that didn't need much finessing to stay a book, right? Like, it was just done, right? And so that's not it was going to be a novella for a Patreon project that I'm participating in. And so, like, it was just too much for that. And so that's going to come out probably in November. And I also have the book that's going to be in the HEA Collective, is the Patreon project. And so I have a surprise secret novella coming out with that. And that'll be another 50s book. And then my next book with Avon next year is also going to be a 1950s book.
What?
I know.
Yeah.
I know.
Exciting.
I'm totally unable to talk about this without saying something, like, without making it sound like I pulled the wool over someone's eyes. Like, do you know what I mean? Like, because the fact is, I had been asking to write a 1950s book for Avon for a while, you know, and when they finally said yes, I was like, are you sure?
Like, really? You're really gonna let me do it?
No.
You had the situation like with your kids, and you're like, don't fight. Wait, what?
Exactly.
Wait, did you say yes?
I am really excited for this. I mean, I
That's
think
awesome.
Avon historicals tend to be very much like in the Regency space. They've got, I guess Eloisa James does Georgian, but that's like
these books
Regency
were Georgian.
adjacent. And then Joanna Troop does the Gilded Age ones, but like they're all like kind of like, you got to have a corset, I guess.
Yeah.
Is that how I think of it in my head?
No, I think of it as cravats. It's like, you know what I mean? Like, it's the same exact thing, like horses and cravats. Like, somebody called it buckle romance. You know, like, and that's what it is. Your clothing has buckles. Yeah, and that was the answer that I had always gotten in the past, was like, yeah, we love the idea, like, good luck self-publishing it, you know, like, but like we've found that books that take place in the 20th century read as women's fiction. Okay. Which probably was true and may in fact still be true. I have no idea. But I think that, like, historical romance, like, the market has gotten weird in the last couple of years. And so people are like, you know what, like, let's see what happens. And I am, like, totally happy to be the experiment.
Yeah. Well, I'm happy.
That's awesome.
So this is going to be not, I'm assuming not Cabot's, because your Cabot's are the self-pub books. So it's a different 1950s.
It's like the real 1950s. It's like the actual, you know what I mean? Like, where, like, the Cabots, you know, there's the divergent timeline situation that I accidentally created by like having no Kennedys. Someone asked me a really intelligent
who is that? If they lived in the 1950s, I don't
like, oops, you know? But like, it's like the actual 1950s, but it's like the same like general vibe as my other 1950s books. It takes place at a newspaper in New York, and it's yeah, and it's like basically a friends to lovers.
Oh, I am a fan already. I had a question. Are you gonna write any more of your, like, page books, like the
Yes. Yeah. I'm always hesitant to, like, say when, because it took me so long to get the second book out. Okay. So it's one of those things that, like, I love self-publishing, but external deadlines are really nice to keep you on pace. Like, you can't get distracted by something shiny, you know. Ideally next year there will be another page book. I really like writing them. Like, they're fun. Like, mysteries are super hard. Like, who knew? Like, all the clues and stuff, like, they are. I have, like, so much respect for people who write, like, 2 cozy mysteries a year. Like, that's rough. I am, because I always, like, when I wrote the second book in the Page series, I gave it to like Rose. I hired Rose Lerner to
Oh yeah.
book doctor it, and she wound up saying something to me like about how clues work, and it was so funny because I had never thought about how it is that clues work. It was like you have to have someone discovers the bloody weapon, and then they think about the bloody weapon, and then later on the weapon comes back and it means something. And I was like, oh my God, like that
It can't be Chekhov's weapon. It has like something has to happen with it later. Yeah.
And like I'm so used to focusing completely on like internal conflict and like internal stuff that like as a reader, it had never occurred to me that that's how that, despite the fact that I read like a gazillion mysteries, like I hadn't realized that there are these like multiple steps of how it works.
Wait, they have to see that murder, like it can't just be there and no one notices it.
They have to think about it. They have to be like, I have seen, you know what I mean? Like, what could it mean that I have seen a bloody knife on the stairs or whatever? You know what I mean? Like, and that's like, it seems so basic, but like, that's not really how we write romance, right? Like in romance, like there's so much of it is you notice it and then you're processing it as it's happening. And like, it's, and like the emotion is what's happening. Right.
Yeah.
But yeah, so like maybe now that I know like the magic, like the secret trick to clues, like maybe the third book will be easier to write. And I can
Rose Lerner unlocked mysteries for you.
Rose is like a genius. Like I'm like, you have no idea. Like she saved that book. It would not exist.
That's awesome. Well, thank you so much for doing this. It was really fun talking to you.
Thank you guys. Thank you.
Where can people find you on the internet? I mean, this month with us, but you also have your own
in general.
Instagram.
I do. For Twitter and Instagram, I'm at Cat S Writes, and my website is catsebastian.com.
Perfect.
Thank you so much, everybody. When you see this, Kat will also be taking over our page on the day that this is going to be posted, and so you can chat with her there as well. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you very much. Bye.